Okay, good. So Makkot, new Mishnah, first chapter, first Mishnah. Makkot is technically about punishment. The word Makkot literally means lashes, as in when flogging someone. And we'll see, maybe we'll talk about flogging in general and its place in the history of punishment. There was a very interesting little book I read once about maybe 10 years ago called In Defense of Flogging. It wasn't a Jewish book. It was just a general book that was basically trying to say, if you think flogging is so bad, take a look at how we currently punish people and decide whether or not what we're currently doing is better or worse than flogging. So maybe we'll come back to that topic when we get to flogging, but we're not going to tonight, because the first chapter of Makkot is not about flogging at all. The first chapter of Makkot is about perjurous witnesses, Edim Zomamim. These are witnesses that are mentioned in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 20, that lie when giving testimony. Now, the people who are here, you guys, I know, have been with me long enough that we remember when we've talked about the giving of testimony and the review of witnesses and all of that, about how serious that is. Because in traditional Jewish law, that's all you've got, right? We don't have forensic, we don't have the DNA, we don't have computer files and security cameras and all of that. We've got people, and that's it. So witnesses were very, very important. And that meant perjury was an even bigger and more severe concern. So in American law, if you catch somebody perjuring, if somebody lies under oath and, they're sitting in the court and they say, yes, I saw him murder Mr. Smith, and then there is
having internal information,
anything
more current than today.
If somebody is lying on the stand, right, and we find out that they're lying, right, that the person said, I saw Mr. X murder Mr. Y. No way you saw Mr. X murder Mr. Y because you were with me in Fiji. So you weren't even possible for you to be there. Then the liar, Mr. X, gets a slap on the wrist. Maybe he goes to jail. Maybe he just pays a big fine. And thank you very much. We're okay. That's not how Jewish law works. In Jewish law, the general rule is, and we're going to find out in our first few Mishnayot, that there are levels of this, the way it works out in practice. But the general rule is that whatever the punishment was going to be for the person about whom you were lying will be done to you instead. Right? So if your lying was going to get them killed, you get executed. If your lying was going to cost them $10,000 because you were lying about a contract, you have to pay $10,000. Right? So it's proportional. The bigger the punishment that you were trying to push onto someone by your lies, the bigger punishment will come right back on you. Make sense? Okay. But it's a very particular type of testimony that is going to be challenged, because it's not just wrong, right? So imagine we'll get into more details, but I just want to make sure you have a picture of this, because it's so different than American law that I need to make sure that you have some idea of what we're dealing with. Imagine somebody goes to the court and they say, what color shirt was the man wearing? And they say, he was wearing a red shirt. And then they pull out pictures and he was wearing a blue shirt. That's not perjury. Right, that is a mistake. Right, well, right, a mistake about a detail, a mistake about some aspect of it that is a mistake, is not considered perjury. What's going to be considered perjurious is giving testimony you couldn't have had. Right, so the location of the witness is more important than the content of the witness. Right, because otherwise, how can we be sure he's lying? Right, maybe he's just wrong. Right? If he says it was $10,000 and the other person says it was $2,000, one of them might just be wrong or one of them might be lying, but how can we tell the difference? But if he says it was $10,000 and there's no physical way for him to have been there because he was down in Fiji with me, now we know for sure that he is a lying witness and the punishment comes down. Make sense for the general rules? Okay, we're going to pull all that apart and we're
That's in today law.
No, that's in Jewish law.
And Jewish law, location is the most important.
Exactly right. The location of the witness is the only thing that can be used to challenge in this particular category. Right? It's not about the accuracy of the testimony. That has its own ways of being checked and worked on. Then if we find out that he has wrong testimony, we can change the outcome of the cases, blah, blah, blah. But the location of the witness, that means we're not talking about the accuracy. We're talking about something that can only be a deliberate lie. You can't accidentally forget that you were in Fiji while pretending to say you were in Los Angeles watching the murder. Right? Right. Okay. Makkot, 1-1. And we're going to have to play ping pong with my gentleman readers. So who would like to go first?
I can start. I got a new version, so let's see if
easy.
How are Somimim deal with this define?
Right. So Somimim, we're talking about perjurers, right? That's the technical term in Jewish law for this type of lying witness.
We testify that A is the son of a divorced woman, or is that correct? And do we have a correct translation?
That so-and-so is the son of a divorced woman, yes?
Yes, or the son of a halutza.
Right. Remember, halutza is a woman who was husband had died without leaving any children, so she has to marry the brother in order to have children. Okay. Go ahead and finish this, and then I'm going to unpack all of what in the world we're talking about.
We do not say that he, the witness, should be made in his stead the son of a divorced woman or a halutza, but he receives 40 lashes.
Okay, so and in typical Mishnah fashion, I love the Mishnah. We're jumping into the middle of the conversation, and we're jumping in with the biggest challenge, which is, okay, so if I lie about where I was and the testimony that I'm giving, and then that means the punishment happens to me, what if the punishment can't happen to me or doesn't make sense? Right? So what if I lie saying that he is the son of a Kohen who was married to a divorced woman, which means that the son is no longer able to officiate in the sacrificial service, right? His Kohanic status is compromised. I'm lying, and I'm an actual perjurous witness, but if I'm not a Kohen, or even if I am a Kohen, the punishment happens to me? What, you're going to go change my mother when I was born? You're going to give me the status that he has, even though it's not really my status? Right? So there are certain cases where the I'm rubber, you're glue doesn't work, right? It can't bounce off him and stick to me because it just doesn't apply. Even more to the case, what if the person said, he has only one leg, they're going to cut off my leg. I mean, you can't always make it tit for tat perfectly. And so what's being discussed here is those really, really exceptional weird cases. Because why not start off with the weirdest case? We'll eventually get back to the normal cases later, but this is where we're starting. And so the idea is, yes, if you make a claim about somebody's status that doesn't apply to you, then it doesn't apply to you, but you're not getting away with it. You will be flogged instead, right? And we'll eventually talk about the flogging and all of that and how many lashes you actually have to give and whether it's really 40 and all of that. But for today, let's just stick with the 40. Part 2. If they say we testify.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. We testify that A is liable to exile. We do not say that he should be exiled in his stead, but he receives 40 lashes.
All right, go ahead and do the. Actually, let's do that first, right? So if the punishment is going to be exile, which we'll find out more about later on, then we don't exile the person in return. We punish them with lashes. And we'll come back to the concept of exile a little bit later, and you'll see why it's more appropriate to flog them rather than pushing them into exile for that crime. Next part.
We testify that A divorced his wife but did not pay her tuba. Seeing that her tuba will have to be paid sooner or later, it is assessed how much a person would be willing to pay for her tuba on the chance that she might become widow or be divorced. Whereas if she dies, her husband would inherit it from her.
Okay, so if you say he divorced her but hasn't paid her ketubah, which means you're trying to force him to pay a bonus ketubah, then do I need to pay him the money that I was trying to make him pay her? That doesn't make sense because there is actually a ketubah that is owed her. So it's not like money that he wasn't going to pay. So how do we figure out how much damage I was trying to do? And so what they come up with is what's the term they use? Exotic financial instrument. Remember when they were doing all the bad loans before the Great Recession, and they were talking about how they bundled them together and then were selling? Well, in this case, toxic, right? But this isn't toxic. This is just, you wouldn't expect someone to invest in this. So what we're talking about here of how we figure out the value of the damage that he was going to do and therefore his penalty is we say, how much would a speculator pay to buy out his ketubah to his wife now, gambling that she'll die before her husband, and knowing that if she dies after her husband, that he will have to pay her directly?
There were a speculator on that?
Apparently, yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah, well, you think like the modern world is the only time people come up with weird investments?
Okay.
Right? Remember, the ketubah is a lien, right? It is a debt on the husband's estate. And as long as he's alive and she's alive, the debt is hanging there. You can sign over that debt to another person. And so for the husband, you know, he might sell it to get, you know, somebody might buy it in order that,
expecting that the woman will die.
Or that the husband will die, in which case he collects, right? So he becomes part of this.
How long does the husband to pay the ketubah?
How long?
How long? How many days? How many?
Oh, what time frame for paying?
Yeah.
As soon as the ketubah is due, he has to pay.
Immediately.
Yeah.
So what happens if
that's why if you divorce someone, you have to pay.
Accident. No real accident.
You mean what happens if someone murders the husband?
Yeah. In order
then
to collect the money.
The estate is settled, and when the estate is settled, the person who owns the ketubah makes the claim on the ketubah.
That's dangerous.
Yeah. You always have such a sneaky. No, of course, but with or without the ketubah loan weird investment thing, you still always have the chance of murder. Right? What happens if someone falls in love with his wife and decides to murder him so he can marry her? I mean, there's always that. And the idea is don't murder. And if someone does murder, find out that it happened and make sure that you catch them. But you're right. There's always going to be a chance that someone is going to want to do something bad for a bad reason. Welcome to humanity. But the good thing is it doesn't happen often. If it did, we'd all be too afraid to leave our houses. All right, last section of this unusual opening for the Mishnah. Actually, it's quite typical for Mishnahs, but unusual topics for us.
We testify that A owes B 1,000 sus, liable to be repaid within 30 days. And the debtor says within 10 years. It is assessed how much a man would be willing to pay for having to repay 1,000 sus within 10 years instead of within 30 days.
All right, so this is a very simple loan adjustment, right? If you loan me 10,000 zuzim and I have to repay that within 10 days, how much would I pay? Not that we charge interest, but how much would I pay if that were permissible to be able to get that money but I knowing I would have to pay it back in 10 days? And how much would I pay to get that money knowing I had 10 years to pay it back? And whatever the difference is between those two numbers, that's how much you have to pay. Make sense? Right? Because you assume that if you're borrowing 1,000 zuz, but you have to pay it back in 10 days, that's going to be a much different calculation than borrowing 1,000 zuz and paying it back in 10 years. Right? Right. Okay. Don't worry. It gets a little bit more direct as we move on. Mishnah chapter 1, Mishnah 2.
They say, testify, so-and-so owes his friend 200 zuz, and they are found to be perjurers. They are flogged in order to make restitution, because the count which brings upon them the flogging is not the count that brings upon them the necessity to make the restitution. These are words of Rabbi Meir. All
right, so Rabbi Meir's position is, if you lie and there is a financial penalty as well, that you should both be flogged and be given the financial penalty, right? You get double punishment. However, the sages, the Hachamim,
but the sages say anyone who makes restitution is not flooded.
Right? They say, look, it's not about you do both. If you make restitution, if you have to make that payment, that is your punishment, and therefore there is no flogging.
Yes, I thought that we spoke that there's no kind of double punishment.
In Sanhedrin, we also discussed
Yes.
that. Yes. Well, here we're talking about you might have thought that there could be double punishment in the case of perjury, right? Because this is a unique situation because you're both lying and doing all of this other shenanigans. But the sages say no. And Rabbi Meir says yes, but Rabbi Meir loses. In this particular case, well, in all cases, almost all cases, the majority of the sages, when that's the voice, is the voice that we follow for the halacha. Okay, we good? Moving on.
I'll do 3 notes because it was short.
Only because it's the bat mitzvah weekend.
Yeah.
If they say, we testify that so-and-so is liable to a flogging of 40 lashes, and they are found to be perjurers, they receive 80 lashes because of, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Exodus 20:13. And you shall do to him as is kin to do to his fellow. Deuteronomy 19:19. These are the words of Rabbi Meir.
All right, so again, we get Rabbi Meir's position, which is there are 2 mitzvot being violated. You should be flogged for each of them. Therefore, you are flogged for both of them. And if one is 40 lashes and the other is 40 lashes, welcome to 80 lashes, right? Simple math, right?
What happens if someone need to receive flogging and run away? Does he receive after when they catch him more as a punishment? Or?
General answer is no, right? In general, whatever you do that delays your punishment doesn't increase your punishment. Unless it's a financial thing where because you haven't paid now, there's more of a debt, more damage to the person, then yes, you have to pay the additional financial damages.
No punishment for trying to avoid justice.
The court can, in other cases, especially in financial cases where a person refuses to pay, the court can say for every day you don't pay, you're also going to pay an additional amount because you're flouting the court. But that's a fine. That's not an additional punishment for the original crime.
But I think what I see wrong here is the 80 lashes, because I think 40 was set as the max.
Absolutely, yes.
So if you hitting somebody 80
Right,
lashes,
but
you might kill him.
So we're going to get into much more of the discussion of the physical nature of flogging and what happens if you think you might kill someone, what happens if you do kill someone. We're going to go through all of that in a later chapter.
Okay.
All right.
So,
but the sages
say they receive only 40 lashes.
Right. So as we talked about before, right, it's the same theory that we had last time, right? Just 40.
40 is the maximum.
40 is the maximum. 40 is what the Torah mentions as the maximum. But to defend Rabbi Meir, although he loses, but to defend his thinking, if the Torah says if you commit crime A, you're lashed 40 times, and if the Torah in another place says if you commit crime B, you're lashed 40 times, why not lash him for 40 times, let him heal, and then lash him for the other one?
That's being very sadistic.
Spoken like somebody who has grown up with this type of Jewish thinking built into his bones, that's not the way we should be doing it. There are many countries where that is exactly what they do, and other countries where more than 80 is normal, right? I mean, you can get up into the hundreds. And in our own history within the United States, within Europe, lashes that went beyond 40 was not all that unusual. And in places where that did happen, sometimes that's exactly what they would do. They didn't want the person to die. They wanted them to get all their lashes. And so they would lash, they would heal, they would lash, they would heal, they would lash, they would heal. Okay. Onward.
Number 2, monetary impositions are shared among the offenders, but the lashes are not shared among the offenders. How so? If they testify that they owed his friend 100 zuz, and they were found to be perjurers, they divide their corresponding damages proportionally area, I guess,
Mhm.
between them.
Right? So imagine there were 4 people lying that were scheming for doing this. They find out that they were lying, that they were going to make this person pay 100. Each one of them now pays 25, right? However,
but if they testify that he was liable to a flogging of 40 lashes and were found to be perjurers, each one receives 40.
right.
I disagree.
We don't divide up the lashes, but we do divide up the costs.
I disagree with the Sasha. We should also give to each of them 100.
Punishment.
Oh, okay. So you don't
fee.
think we should divide the lashes, but you think we shouldn't also divide the financial penalty.
No, the financial penalty, like it was 100
Right.
in total,
Right.
and each need to pay 25.
Mhm.
I think that we need to take each of them as a case. So each
100.
each need to pay 100 because each of them did the same damage and the same action.
Okay, so this is a good chance for me to use the whiteboard. So we have a problem here, which is you have a scheme, right? Their plan,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got. We're going to use 4 just because it makes the math easy, but it could be 2, it could be 3, it could be 20, and you've got 4 people that are part of the scheme, and the scheme is to steal or cause the guy 100 zuzim loss or $100 loss. The question that the Mishnah is wrestling with is, do you recognize that it is one scheme with one goal, and therefore that goal is divided by the people, which is the rule of the majority in the Mishnah? Or do you say this was 4 schemes, each that was trying to deprive him of 100? Let's just make sure that isn't a warning about the recording. Nope, that's fine. And therefore, each one of them independently was liable for the full amount.
Or you can see it in a different way.
Mhm.
It's by the action. Like because each of them have the kavanah
Yeah.
to steal the 100.
But remember, it's not steal.
But no matter it's a scheme together, but it's like each individual have the same negative intention of action. So each of them need to receive the punishment.
But
The 100. You see, like not like a group, but because the intentional.
right.
The action.
So the question is the 100 a punishment for the scheme or a punishment for the person? Right? Because what's happening here, and to understand why the Mishnah comes down the way it does, is the problem is one person alone
Mhm.
can't scheme in Jewish law.
Yeah.
Right? For this type of case, one person alone can't scheme. If I get up and I give testimony that you owe him 100 zuzim and you don't really owe him 100 zuzim, I can't testify because there's only one witness. There has to be an agreement between myself and someone else that this is what's going on. We have to be a group in order to scheme in Jewish law, right? It has to be at least 2 people to make a scheme. Therefore, the 2 of them are liable for the $100 that they were trying to do. However, the individual is not liable for something that can't be, but the group is not liable for something that can't be divided. So, for example, execution, murder.
That was my second question.
Right, I can't half kill you and half kill you.
Exactly.
Right, so that means each of you gets the full penalty. That makes perfect sense to me.
So what about exile? If there's some punishment for exile.
We'll come back to that in chapter 2, I think it is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because so what you divide half exile.
Yeah, go half away.
That's it.
Yeah, just go to that country on the border, or that city on the border. Right.
So you said that is depending the punishment. If you can divide the punishment, fine, they are lucky.
Right.
If not, each of them receive the whole punishment.
Right. So what's novel
But
here?
it's not very consistent, by the way.
Well,
the logic is not very consistent inside.
It is and isn't. I mean, but what's novel here, and why this Mishnah is specifically talking about lashes rather than death, is because you might think because there is 40 lashes or 10 lashes or whatever the penalty might be, that because this is also a number, maybe I can divide that number and each one only gets 10. But this is a unit of punishment, not the amount that the scheme was about. And therefore, they get each the full unit because they were participating in the scheme. we'll get a few more examples and maybe we'll...
Because I think that what bothers me more is the internal inconsistent of the logic.
Okay.
That if you take like, okay, the whole, to create a scheme or whatever,
right,
and you need to do all the time the same. You cannot break, oh yes, you know, now we cannot kill half kill each, so we divide, but now with money, right. Yes. That in this situation, yes, in this situation, no. You need to have some consistency, okay, in your rationale, right. How to implement the justice. And I see here that there's some kind of inconsistency, and bothering me a lot.
I see another thing, no deterrent, because only if they have to pay only 25 zuz each. Okay, so next time it's okay. The most we're gonna lose is 25, but there's no deterrent here. If you put them 100% each, I mean 100 zuz right. each, you get a really good deterrent.
So, and that's more how American law thinks.
Yes.
Right, which is very much the punishment is not just about the person who's being punished, it's about everyone else watching the punishment. In general, Jewish law is not about the spectator. I mean, sometimes there is a public element to remind people of the severity of committing certain crimes, but by and large, Judaism doesn't change the punishment of one person in order to change the opinion of another person. That is using this person as a teaching aid rather than giving them the justice that they have actually earned, right? Which is a big problem because in American law, and indeed most modern legal systems, we often are torn between how we treat our prisoners for the betterment of the prisoner, to make them a better person by the time their punishment is done, and scaring other people with how we treated them so they won't want to do it. Right? It's, do you make prison into a place where someone can get an education, where someone can, you know, learn a good job, where they can go to therapy to figure out why they committed the crimes, get drug rehabilitation so they're not addicted to the drugs, which might have, and now they're like, well, it's wonderful. I'll go to there. They have a gym, they have psychiatrists, they have doctors, I get good meals, and I can learn a job. I mean, it's like college just with bars on the window. And now people say, oh, it's too attractive, right? You're rewarding them for committing a crime. On the other hand, should prison be a place where every time you're there, the guards are allowed to beat you up and the other prisoners are going to do more crimes against you and you don't get any protection in prison because somehow, because you're in prison, you don't have the right to the police to protect you, right? So people can beat you up, they can rape you and steal things from you, but hey, you're in prison, so we don't care. We want to make prison be the most horrible thing ever. I had an argument with a friend a long time ago where he said, you know, if I were homeless, I would go out and commit crimes just so I could have a place to sleep. To which I responded to him, so you mean prison should be worse than living on the street and eating garbage? That's what you think prison should be, right? Because if you're saying that prison needs to be worse than being homeless to keep homeless people from voluntarily committing crimes, then your vision of prison is something that is worse than how horrible it is to be actually homeless. He didn't really have a response for that because there isn't a response to that. If you turn prison into the punishment, that is to say the living conditions as opposed to the loss of freedom into the punishment, then what you usually do is end up making the person worse by the time they leave. Right? If the loss of the freedom is the punishment, then the fact that they're in a beautiful college, you know, where they get therapy, health, and education without leaving is still punishment, right? If we believe the punishment is truly the loss of our freedom, then that should be good enough. And so too here, if we believe that the punishment is 25 zirzim, because it was all four of you together and we're going to divide it, I don't need to punish you more. I'm giving you exactly the punishment you've earned. And I don't have to worry that someone else says, well, 25 zirzim, I'll risk that. Yeah, they might.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to punish these people more just because he might, right? They did, so they get, and we're done, right? That in general is the way that the Jewish legal system is leveled out in order to make sure that the punishment just fits the crime. No more, no less. I should point out one more time, I think we mentioned this when we did Sanhedrin, but a reminder, Judaism is very aware that the power of the community, of the state, of the dayan, of the judge, is limited only to where Torah gives permission, right? So if I take 1 penny more, 1 dinar more from Mr. A to give to Mr. B because of a contract dispute, I'm stealing. And if I, give 1 more lash than I was supposed to give, then it's the same as if I whipped a person in the middle of the street, that had done no crime at all. Right? I can't say, he's a criminal, so if I did 1 more big deal. No, if you give 1 more lash, it's the exact same as if you lashed an innocent person in the middle of the road. So Judaism recognizes that the authority, the power that's of the state, of the community, is extremely limited and only given very, very sensitively, tenderly by Torah to the community, only to operate within its command. Right? We should never deprive anyone of their property. We should never deprive anyone of their freedom, never deprive anyone of their, health, because it might serve some other purpose. Right? That we're just simply not allowed to do that. The Torah is a very limiting document, not expansive. Okay, we are
So the second.
Yeah, the second part, right? Yes.
Yeah. But if they testify that he was liable to a flogging
Right.
of 40 lashes and were found to be perjurers, each one received 40 lashes.
Exactly, as we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Good. 1-4. I believe it's your turn again, Nathan.
Yes. Well, but they can divide the 40 lashes. But they can divide the 40 lashes.
But it's not the 40 lashes as the thing they were trying to do as the scheme. Each one of them is being punished for lying by the 40 by 40 lashes.
Oh, okay. So I understand. So the Zuzim is because the Zuzim they tried to steal.
Well, they tried to make him lose. I mean, whether or not they had a backroom deal that they were going to get the money to them, because we wouldn't accept testimony from someone who was actually involved in the monetary case. But the fact is they were trying to cause 100 zuzim loss.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense? Okay, 1-4.
Witnesses are not condemned as Zomemim until they themselves are incriminated. Also, if they say, we testify that A killed B, and other witnesses say to them, how can you testify to that since the murdered person or the murderer was with us on that day in a particular place that we talk about occasion? They are not Zomemim.
Okay, so let's make sure we understand. This is the case where they are not Zomamim. They may still be lying, they may still be wrong, and the court may find it out other ways. But if we have, we're going to use some different names here. We're going to call him Mr. Z for Zomamim, right? And then you've got Mr. Victim, and you've got Mr. Murderer, Mr. V and Mr. M. And then you've got other witnesses. Well, we have to make 2 of these guys, because if we don't have 2, we don't have anything. And we've got 2 other witnesses over here, and we're going to call them actually W for proper witnesses. If the Zomamim say that M killed V, and the witnesses say, you're wrong because M wasn't there on that day, that is not Zomamim. That is not perjury. Even if they are lying, we can't be 100% sure that they are lying. Perhaps what they are doing is mistaken. Perhaps they thought it was M, but it turns out it wasn't M, it was N, right, or O. And they made a mistake. But they could make that mistake because they were in the place where the crime was happening. They thought they saw it, and they were just wrong. And these witnesses aren't saying anything about them, right? In this case, they're only talking about the case. And you can change and talk about the case all you want, and you have not perjured under Jewish law. However, let's do the other side.
But if they say to them, how can you testify to that since you were with us on that day in a particular place? These are some men and are executed on the evidence.
Right? If
Because one is an innocent mistake, and the other one not.
It may or may be an innocent mistake. It's the maybe, right? It's the maybe. I mean, it's the famous dictum, you know, that we would rather let 1,000 guilty people go free than kill one innocent person. And that's very much a Jewish principle. And what the important part about this is that these witnesses, for it to be a case of zomamim and for it to backfire on them and them to get the punishment, their testimony has to be about the zomamim themselves, not about the case. Right? So they're not disputing the facts of their case, they're disputing the facts of where you could be to have had information about the case. That's the only testimony that can bring them down. I mean, there's other testimony that can contradict them, and then the court has to find out who's right, who's wrong, just by, you know, all the normal case issues. But this is information about them, not about the case. And that's what makes this a special situation. Make sense? Okay. So yes, it would have been nice if Mishnah Makkot had begun with number 4, because I think that that's a good starting place. But, you know, I didn't get to edit the Mishnah, and it's worked well for almost 2,000 years, so I can't really complain. Okay, I can't, you know, Yehuda Hanassi did a good job editing, because it's certainly stuck around for a while. Much better than any books I'm going to write, I'm sure. Makkot 1:5, we still have time. It's a short one.
Okay. If other witnesses came, they charged them with perjury. Then again, other came, and they again charged them with perjury. Even 100, they are all to be executed.
Executed or lashes?
Well, they're using the case of murder as the most extreme example, right? They're using the most extreme example. So what's being talking about here, right? So that, so we have our zomamim, right? Because the witnesses came, and then we get another, right, set that, I'm drawing that in the wrong place. And then we get another set, probably shouldn't have used red, that are also lying about the case, and maybe there are other witnesses, right, that can testify against them. They also get executed, right? It's you can just keep going. Anybody who comes, if there are 100 witnesses lined up, and they all say, we were on a bus when this happened, and the court brings in the first 2, and they find out you were not on the bus, the other ones still are liable for the whole backlash. You don't stop after the first part of the witness testimony and say, okay, we've already gotten rid of, these other guys are clearly disqualified, we're done. It's nope, if they are all zomamim, they are all going to face the same penalty. That's rough, because, you know, why do we need to? We've stopped the conspiracy. Why do we need to keep going?
Because they are still doing the same mistake, the same bad intention.
Yes. And that's ultimately why, right? Which is why Rabbi Yehuda, however, disagrees with that. So go ahead and read part 2.
Rabbi Yehuda say this is a conspiracy, and the first set alone is to be executed.
Right? That we only need to take care of the first 2.
So the halacha go by
The majority, right? Rabbi Yehuda does not win this argument. Good. Now, I mean, there's a bit of an issue here, because what Rabbi Yehuda is also trying to bring out with this conspiracy note is, let's imagine that we have a different situation. You're nice and sneaky, Natan, right? So let's imagine that the 2 Mr. Z's, they give their testimony, and then the Mr. W's, they say, you were with us in Fiji, and we killed them. And then the Mr. Y's come up, and Mr. W's, same Mr. W's, say, no, they were with us in Fiji too. And then Mr. K get up there, and Mr. W says, nope, they were in Fiji too.
But so now someone needs to double check that Mr. W, because maybe he has something
against
the others.
And that's what Rabbi Yehuda is saying, right? Is saying, well, wait a minute, if the W's keep bringing down everybody who comes out, maybe they've got their own testimony and agreement, right? Maybe they have worked out a conspiracy between them to do in any witnesses, maybe to protect someone, maybe because they don't like the people who are testifying, whatever it might be. These maybe are lying people.
You cannot ask or find another witness.
So yes, if you end up with witnesses too, who say, we saw them in Orlando, not Fiji, then they get executed, right? Because they were lying about them in order that they would receive the punishment of the murderer. So it works all the way back to them. And if someone else comes and says, no, you couldn't have known they were in Orlando because you were in Toronto, then they get the penalty.
Yeah, but in that example, okay,
right.
Let's say that it's not murder because it's treason. Let's say it's stealing.
Okay.
But so now you need to really punish seriously the W because W, the other people receive the punishment of lodging or whatever. So in this case, they receive all the lodging that the other people receive in addition,
yep.
Or only the 40? Just
the 40. Right? It never goes up. Right? If whatever the punishment was going to be for the original case can work its way back down the chain of lies to whoever lied. And if they lied and they lied and they lied and they lied, then they're all getting the same punishment they would have had. It doesn't get worse, but they all share it. They all get it. And that's because in order to keep the system of evidence clean in Jewish law, you have to make sure that there is a seriousness that is felt by all the witnesses. That when you give testimony, you may be right, you may be wrong, you may misremember, you may remember correctly. That's fine, and we want you to come testify. We don't want to make you scared of testifying. But if you get up there and lie about something that you have no way of knowing, you will be nailed to the wall. Because if you don't do that, then people will say, you know what, so what if they give me a $100 fine? So what if they give me a $1,000 fine? Right? If I can put that guy in jail, I'll do it. You know, if I can get that guy executed, I'll do it. You have to make it so that the person realizes the severity of lying in cases like this. Not of being mistaken, because we do want them to show up and give testimony, but the severity of lying.
So how do people find other witnesses? They publish in...
Yes, there is a case about such and such, and there are witnesses so-and-so who say that...
Every town around?
Well, it's not exactly that big of an area. I mean, it's...
Because maybe someone from a different village came here to visit and they saw them in a different place, or they were in a different village.
Right. And unfortunately, they didn't have the internet. They didn't have telegraphs or telephones or television and all of that, but they did the best they could, yes, to publicize that a case was happening about so-and-so on such and such a time, and so-and-so says that they witnessed it. And if anyone has any evidence about this, they can come and share that evidence. But cases were handled rather quickly, usually, because there wasn't a lot of evidence, right? Remember, no DNA tests, no fiber analysis, no tire track analysis. It was, did you see it? Yes. Did anyone else see them somewhere else? No? All right, so we take their testimony. Right? That was all you had. So they did it, but it could often still finish in just 2 days, even for a capital crime, because you didn't have so much to work with. And we'll get back to that. I'm trying to decide. No, we're going to not do 1/6. Well, we can do a little bit more of our discussion on halakha, but 1/6 gets way more complicated again. And looking at the time, I don't want to jump into it. So we'll save 1/6 for next week. Come on, monitor. Wake up.